They say ignorance is bliss. Whoever invented that lie never found a gym receipt stuck to their husband's polished dress shoe, especially when that husband hasn't stepped inside a gym since before smartphones existed. I'm Elena Kowalski. I fix cars for a living. Not the glossy Instagram kind. I'm talking about minivans that smell like old fries and pickup trucks that sound like they're crying for mercy. My garage sits on the wrong side of town, where the American dream comes in, coughing smoke, and leaves with a rebuilt transmission. My husband, Samuel Kowalski, lives in a completely different universe. Corporate attorney, tailored suits, controlled smile, a man who speaks in depositions and strategy, while I speak in torque specs and oil viscosity. We met in college, back when he still thought a woman who could fix her own engine was impressive. Somewhere along the way, I became less a partner and more a fixture. Like the garage itself, useful, reliable, easy to overlook. That receipt changed everything. Elite Fitness Club, private training session, $150. Last Tuesday. The same Tuesday he told me he'd be working late on the Morrison case. I held that receipt under the fluorescent lights of my garage, turning it over like it might confess if I stared hard enough. My assistant, Jake, wandered over, wiping grease off his hands. "What's that?" he asked. "Evidence," I said quietly, folding it once, then twice. Evidence that my husband is either secretly transforming into a fitness model or lying to my face. Jake raised an eyebrow. He's 25 and thinks he understands marriage because he watches too much reality TV. "You think he's cheating?" "I think," I said, slipping the receipt into my wallet, "that married men don't lie about gym memberships unless there's a very good reason." That night, Samuel walked in at 8:30 sharp. Same expensive cologne, same tight jaw. He kissed my cheek like he was checking a box. "How was work?" I asked, eyes still on the TV. "Exhausting," he said. "Depositions ran late." I took a slow breath. "Maybe you should work out," I said casually. "Relieve some stress." He froze halfway up the stairs. When I mentioned Elite Fitness Club, the color drained from his face so fast I thought he might collapse. But Samuel is a lawyer. He recovered instantly. And in that moment, watching him lie so smoothly, I knew my life was about to break open in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Before the receipt, before the lies stacked so neatly they almost looked like truth, there was a version of us that made sense. I'm Elena Kowalski, 41 years old, grease under my nails, calluses on my palms, and a stubborn pride in building something with my own hands. I grew up in a house where nothing was thrown away if it could be fixed. Engines, appliances, people. My father used to say, "If it's broken, you learn why. You don't walk away." That belief shaped everything I became. Samuel and I met our sophomore year of college. He was studying law, already polished, already confident, already certain the world would make room for him. I was double majoring in automotive engineering and business, one of 3 women in a class full of men who assumed I was lost. The first time we spoke, his car had died in the parking lot. He stood there, jacket draped over his arm, frustration written all over his face. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about engines, would you?" he asked, half joking. "I fixed it in 20 minutes. He watched like it was magic. That night turned into coffee. Coffee turned into late-night talks. He liked that I was different. I liked that he listened, really listened, when I talked about torque ratios and shop layouts, the same way he talked about constitutional law. We balanced each other, or so I thought. We married 3 years later. No fireworks, no drama, just a quiet ceremony and a shared belief that we were building something solid. While Samuel climbed the corporate ladder, I scraped together loans and sweat equity to open my garage. We supported each other, or at least we told ourselves we did. The first cracks were small. Missed dinners, phone calls taken in another room, Samuel correcting my grammar in front of his colleagues, then smiling like it was harmless. I ignored it. His world changed faster than mine. Power lunches replaced study sessions. Judges replaced classmates. His friend circle shifted, law partners, consultants, and Rachel Morrison, his law school best friend, the kind of woman who treated charity events like war strategy. Rachel never liked me. She was polite, but it was the kind of politeness that left bruises. "You're very grounded, Elena," she once said, eyes flicking to my boots. "Samuel's ambition must feel heavy for you." I laughed it off. I always did. We tried for children. For years. When it didn't happen, Samuel retreated into work. I retreated into my garage. We never fought about it. We just stopped talking about it, like silence could protect us from grief. By the time he became a senior partner, something had shifted. Samuel no longer talked with me. He talked at me. I became the person he updated, not the person he confided in. Still, I stayed, because marriages don't fall apart all at once. They erode. And when Samuel told me he was too busy for vacations, when he started criticizing how I dressed for his events, when Rachel's influence in his life grew louder than my voice, I told myself this was just a phase. That receipt proved how wrong I was, because while I was fixing other people's broken machines, my marriage had been quietly dismantled, piece by piece, and someone else had been helping him do it. After I mentioned Elite Fitness Club, Samuel didn't explode. He didn't confess. He didn't even argue. He did something worse. He adapted. The next morning, he was unusually pleasant, making coffee, humming softly like a man with nothing to hide. He kissed my forehead before leaving, and for a split second I almost questioned myself. Almost. Because I've spent my whole life around machines, and I know the difference between something running smoothly and something running quietly because a bigger failure is coming. At the garage, I couldn't focus. Every time a customer spoke, their voice blurred into background noise. My hands moved on autopilot. Tighten, check, wipe, repeat. But my mind kept replaying that moment on the stairs. The way Samuel's face drained, the way his eyes flashed, the way he recovered too fast. Jake noticed. He leaned against the tool cabinet while I stared at an open engine bay without seeing it.
"You okay?" he says.
Yeah, I lied automatically. Then the truth pushed its way out anyway. No. Jake made a small sound like he wanted to say more but didn't want to cross a line. He'd worked for me long enough to know I didn't invite pity. You think he's really doing it? He asked carefully. I think he's lying, I said. And when someone lies that cleanly, it's never for something small. That evening, Samuel came home earlier than usual. He ate with me at the table instead of in front of his laptop. He asked about the garage, asked like it mattered. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like performance. And then Rachel entered the picture again, right on schedule. Samuel mentioned her name while scrolling through his phone. Rachel's hosting a charity gala this weekend, he said. She wants us there. Us. He hadn't said us in months. I kept my tone neutral. And you want to go? It's important, he replied, smooth as glass. For my career, for networking. I knew what that meant. It meant appearance. It meant image. It meant Samuel stepping into his world, then looking back at me like I was something he had to bring along, not someone he chose. Fine, I said, we'll go. His shoulders loosened, like he'd passed some internal test. Then, as if he couldn't resist, he added, just wear the navy dress, the tailored one. And maybe don't talk too much about the garage. People there don't really what? I cut in softly. He paused. His gaze flicked up, then away. Don't relate, he finished. I stared at him, feeling a quiet heat bloom in my chest. Not loud rage, not dramatic tears. Something colder. Something that made me understand suddenly that my marriage hadn't just been neglected. It had been curated. Rachel's voice echoed in my memory. You're very grounded, Elena, like it was an insult wrapped in a compliment. I watched Samuel stand, rinse his plate, and move around our kitchen like a man who believed he still owned the narrative of our life. That night, when he went upstairs to shower, his phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to, because the sound alone, sharp, frequent, urgent, felt like a heartbeat that didn't belong in my home. Over the next few days, the small things piled up. Samuel took calls outside. He started working late again. He began using a new cologne, something crisp and expensive that didn't smell like him. And then there was the one detail I couldn't unsee. His shoes, always spotless, always polished. Like he wanted to look perfect when he stepped out, even if he didn't bother looking at me when he stepped back in. By Friday, the air between us felt thick, not from fighting, from pretending. And the strangest part? Samuel started acting like he was waiting for something, like the gala wasn't just another event, like it was a checkpoint, a place where plans would move forward. I stood in front of my closet Friday night, fingers hovering over the navy dress, and my reflection looked back at me with eyes that were sharper than they used to be. Okay, I whispered to myself. If you want to play perfect, I'll show up perfect. Because whatever Samuel was hiding, whatever Rachel was helping him cover, I could feel it now, like a crack spreading through glass. And I knew the gala would be the night it finally shattered. The gala was exactly what I expected. Crystal chandeliers, champagne that cost more than my first toolbox, People dressed like they were auditioning for a version of themselves they wanted the world to believe in. The cause this month was literacy, which felt ironic, considering half the room couldn't read a room to save their lives. Samuel looked effortless in his tailored suit, confident, relaxed. At home, he carried tension like a second spine. Here, among his people, he floated. I walked beside him in my navy dress, posture straight, expression calm. Years in a male-dominated garage taught me how to stand my ground without making noise. If anyone underestimated me tonight, that was their mistake. Rachel Morrison spotted us immediately. "Elena," she said, kissing the air near my cheek, "you look lovely." The pause before lovely was deliberate. "Rachel," I replied evenly. She looped her arm through Samuel's like it belonged there. "Come. There are people you need to meet." People he needed to meet. I let them drift ahead, watching Samuel fall into his practiced smile, the one he used when he was winning. I picked up a glass of whiskey instead of champagne and scanned the room, letting instinct do what it does best. That's when I saw her. She was younger than me, late 20s maybe, tall, athletic, the kind of body built by discipline and mirrors. She wore a fitted black dress that didn't scream for attention. It commanded it. Her name tag read, Aurora Hart, Elite Fitness Club, personal trainer. My grip tightened on the glass. I watched Samuel's body react before his mind caught up. The subtle straightening of his spine, the way his eyes softened, the way his mouth curved into a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. They laughed together. Not polite laughter, not professional laughter. The kind of laughter that comes from shared jokes, shared time, shared secrets. She touched his arm when she spoke. He leaned in when she answered. I felt something settle in my chest, not panic, not disbelief. Recognition. My phone vibrated. A text from Mick, the owner of the boxing gym where I worked out my frustration. "Saw your husband at Murphy's bar last week. With a woman. Thought you should know." I looked up. Samuel and Aurora were gone. I found them on the terrace. They stood close enough that the city lights blurred behind them. Aurora's hand rested flat against his chest, fingers splayed like she knew the terrain. Samuel was whispering something that made her laugh. That laugh. Real. Unfiltered. The laugh I hadn't heard in my kitchen in over a year. They didn't see me until I spoke. "Samuel." They jumped apart like teenagers caught sneaking out. His face went through shock, calculation, irritation, then settled on control. "Elena," he said. "This is Aurora. She's a trainer at my gym." "Trainer." "Of course." Aurora extended her hand with a confident smile. "Nice to finally meet you. Samuel talks about you." "Finally." I shook her hand, firm and steady. "Funny," I said calmly. "He's never mentioned you." The silence stretched tight enough to snap. "Well," Rachel's voice cut in as she appeared behind us, too smooth, too rehearsed, "we should all head back inside." As we walked, I caught Aurora's reflection in the glass doors. She was smiling. Not politely, not nervously. It was a satisfied smile. The kind a woman wears when she believes she's already won. That night, I lay awake listening to Samuel's breathing beside me. Slow, even, unbothered. I stared at the ceiling and finally let the truth settle where denial used to live. My husband wasn't just cheating. He was building a future without me, and Rachel was helping him do it. I didn't confront Samuel that night. That's the part people don't understand. They imagine screaming, plates shattering, tears soaking pillows. They imagine betrayal exploding all at once. But real shock doesn't explode. It freezes. I lay there beside him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wondering how a man could sleep so peacefully while dismantling a life we built over 20 years. My body felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. My hands were cold, my chest tight, my thoughts slow and sharp at the same time. Don't react yet, I told myself. If you react, you give him control. The next morning, I didn't cry. I made coffee. I packed my lunch. I kissed him goodbye. Samuel didn't notice anything different. That hurt more than the affair itself. At the garage, I finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. I sat alone in my office, door locked, staring at the same wall I'd stared at for years, while making payroll decisions and expansion plans. My hands shook when I tried to pick up my phone. How long? How many lies? How much of my life has already been rewritten without me? Jake knocked softly. "You okay in there?" I took a breath and opened the door. "I need you to run things this afternoon," I said. "I've got personal stuff." He nodded. Didn't pry, just respect. That alone almost undid me. Instead of driving home, I parked across the street from Elite Fitness Club. I told myself I was just confirming what I already knew. Samuel's car pulled in at 10:15 a.m. He was supposed to be in court. I watched him walk inside wearing workout clothes I'd never seen before. Expensive, fitted, intentional. This wasn't stress relief. This was preparation. 20 minutes later, I saw Aurora through the window of a private training room. She wasn't correcting his posture. She was touching him. The phone call came then. Mick, Elena, he said gently. You sound like hell. Where are you? Outside a gym, I replied, watching my husband cheat on me. Silence. Then, come to the boxing gym, please. You shouldn't be alone. The gym smelled like sweat and old leather and people who'd hit their lowest point and kept going anyway. Mick handed me a coffee and looked at me like someone delivering bad news already knew I deserved better. How long have you known? I asked. 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. My chest tightened. 6 weeks of smiles. 6 weeks of lies. 6 weeks of him coming home and sleeping beside me. Mick showed me photos. Samuel and Aurora at Murphy's bar. Samuel and Aurora outside a downtown hotel. Rachel with them, always nearby, always watching. This isn't just an affair, Mick said quietly. They're planning something. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about passion, or midlife crisis, or ego. This was strategy. I drove home in a fog. Samuel texted me, working late again. Don't wait up. I replied, okay, love you. The lie tasted bitter. That evening, when he finally came home, I was ready. Samuel, I said calmly, we need to talk. His shoulders stiffened just slightly. About what? About us. He exhaled, like I was inconveniencing him. Elena, I'm exhausted. Can this wait? No, I said, it can't. I watched his face carefully. I went to Elite Fitness today, I continued. I saw you, with Aurora. The silence was deafening. He didn't deny it. Instead, he rubbed his temples and said, You're misunderstanding. No, I replied quietly. I'm finally understanding. He sat down across from me, posture perfect, voice measured. I didn't plan for this to happen, he said. Things just evolved. With my money? I asked. With my marriage? His eyes flickered. You've changed, he said. You're always at the garage. You don't fit into my world anymore. There it was. Not guilt, not remorse. Just justification. I nodded slowly, feeling something inside me settle into place. Thank you, I said. For what? For telling me the truth, I replied, even if you didn't mean to. That night, as he slept peacefully upstairs, I sat alone in the living room and made a decision. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't explode. I wouldn't warn him. If Samuel thought I was still the woman who fixed broken things quietly and hoped they'd hold together, he was about to learn what happens when a woman stops fixing and starts watching very carefully instead. After that night, something shifted. Not in Samuel, in me. I stopped asking questions, stopped searching his face for honesty, stopped trying to understand why. Because once you realize someone has already chosen a life without you, understanding becomes irrelevant. What matters is survival. Samuel grew bolder. He stopped hiding the late nights, stopped apologizing for missed dinners. His phone was always face down now, always locked. He spoke to me like I was a fragile situation to be managed, not a wife who deserved truth. And then his family got involved. It started with his mother. She called one afternoon while I was closing the garage, her voice syrupy and concerned. Elena, sweetheart, she said. Samuel tells me you've been stressed lately. I closed my eyes. Stressed, I repeated. Well, she continued, marriage is hard, especially when a woman gets stuck in her ways. Men need inspiration. There it was. Not his betrayal, not his lies. My failure to evolve. I see, I said quietly. You know, she added, Rachel has been such a support to Samuel. She understands his world. Maybe you should try to be more flexible. Flexible. Like bending until you break. The calls didn't stop there. Friends I hadn't heard from in years suddenly reached out, concerned, curious, suspiciously informed. Samuel's under a lot of pressure. You know how ambitious he is. Men sometimes drift when they feel unappreciated. No one asked how I was. No one asked what it felt like to be replaced in slow motion. Meanwhile, Rachel became more visible. She posted photos with Samuel at charity events, cropped just carefully enough to exclude me. She liked comments about his future and his next chapter. She was no longer subtle. And Aurora? Aurora stopped pretending at all. She showed up at places Samuel used to take me. She wore his jacket in public. She laughed too loudly, too confidently. She wanted to be seen. I watched it all quietly, the way you watch a structure fail, note by note, bolt by bolt. And I started changing. Not on the outside, on the inside. I called a private investigator. His name was Thomas Reeves, former cop. Calm voice, forgettable face, the kind of man who knew how to listen without judgment. "How long have you been married?" he asked. 20 years, I said. "Long enough to know this isn't just an affair." "What do you want to know?" "Everything," I replied. "How long, where they go, and what Rachel Morrison's role is." He paused. This could get expensive. I thought of the joint accounts, the savings Samuel managed, the life we built together. "Money's not the problem," I said. "Time is. I think they're planning something soon." Thomas didn't disappoint. Within a week, he had patterns. Gym twice a week, hotel downtown once a week, Murphy's Bar every Friday. 3 months. 3 months of my life rewritten without my consent. But the worst part wasn't the affair. It was the money. Rachel wasn't just supporting Samuel emotionally. She was helping him move funds. Small amounts. Consistent. Accounts I didn't have access to. Preparation. I felt anger then. Not explosive, not reckless. Focused. Because I understood something Samuel didn't. He thought I was still reacting. But I wasn't. I was preparing. And while his family blamed me, his friends judged me, and his lover celebrated, I was becoming someone they didn't see coming. A woman who knew the system. A woman who understood documentation. A woman who'd spent her entire life fixing things by learning exactly how they broke. And once I understood the full design of what they were doing, I knew this story wasn't heading toward reconciliation. It was heading toward a reckoning. The lowest point doesn't always come with shouting or violence. Sometimes it arrives quietly, on a night when the house feels too large, too empty, and you realize you no longer recognize the life you're standing inside. For me, it was a Thursday in November. Cold. Rain pressing against the windows like it wanted in. The kind of night that makes silence feel heavier than noise. Samuel wasn't home. Again. I sat alone at the kitchen table with my laptop open, scrolling through evidence Thomas had compiled. Dates, photos, bank transfers, messages. Everything laid out so cleanly it felt surgical. And yet none of it prepared me for the call. Unknown number. "Elena, this is Tom Bradley. We met at Rachel's gala." Tom Bradley, investment banker. One of the few people in Samuel's circle who'd ever spoken to me like I mattered. "Is everything okay?" I asked. There was a pause, a careful breath. "I might be out of line," he said, "but I thought you should know. I saw Samuel tonight at Morton's Steakhouse." My fingers tightened around the phone. He wasn't alone. I already knew the answer, but my body needed to hear it anyway. "He was with Aurora," Tom continued, "and Rachel. They were celebrating something. Champagne. Expensive kind." Celebrating. "Did you hear what?" I asked. "No, but I heard your name, and they were laughing." That was it. Not the cheating, not the stolen money, not the betrayal. The laughter. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the dark window. 41 years old, hair pulled back, hands still marked by work. A woman who had loved deeply and been quietly erased. I didn't cry. I drove. Morton's parking lot was half full when I arrived. I waited, watched, counted breaths like I used to during hard workouts. They came out together. Samuel was drunk, happier than I'd seen him in years. Aurora hung off his arm, laughing like the world had finally opened its doors to her. Rachel walked beside them, composed, victorious. They didn't see me. I followed them to Rachel's house in the hills, parked across the street, watched the lights come on, curtains close. I sat there for 3 hours. 3 hours imagining what they were planning. 3 hours wondering how I'd become the joke. 3 hours fighting the urge to walk up and demand answers that no longer mattered. That was the night I finally understood something brutal. They weren't afraid of me. They thought I was already defeated. When I got home, I didn't go to bed. I sat in the dark living room, rain tapping against the glass, and let the weight of everything settle. This was the end of the woman who waited, who hoped, who fixed. Because when you hit bottom, you don't fall anymore. You either stay there or you push off. And sometime around 3 a.m., with the house silent and my heart steady for the first time in weeks, I made a decision. If they wanted to play games with my life, my marriage, my future, then I would stop being the woman they were playing. I would become the woman who ended it. The morning after that night, I didn't wake up broken. I woke up clear. There's a difference between rage and resolve. Rage burns fast and leaves nothing useful behind. Resolve is quieter, colder. It gives you patience. I called Thomas Reeves before the garage opened. "I'm ready," I said. "I want everything finalized." He didn't ask what I meant. He already knew. By noon, I had the full picture. Samuel's affair had started 3 months earlier, but the planning, that went back much further. Rachel had been advising him, strategizing even. She'd helped him consult a high-profile divorce attorney named Marcus Webb, a man famous for stripping spouses down to nothing. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to erase me. And then Thomas handed me the file that changed everything. Rachel Morrison wasn't just helping Samuel hide money. She'd been moving money through her charities. Small amounts, carefully disguised. Enough to stay under radar. Enough to look like administrative noise. Except it wasn't noise. It was fraud. Are you sure? I asked. Positive, Thomas replied. Bank records, fake invoices, forged approvals. I leaned back in my chair and felt something shift. Not vengeance, not triumph. Balance. For the first time since the receipt, the scales weren't tilted against me. They were equal, and equal is all I needed. That afternoon, Samuel texted me, working late again. Don't wait up. I replied, no problem, drive safe. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I started preparing. I reviewed every joint account, every business document, every clause Samuel had assumed I'd never read because I didn't speak his language. He was wrong. I'd built emergency controls into the garage years ago, fraud protection measures, contingencies, safeguards. He'd never bothered to learn how my business worked. That night, Samuel came home early. Too early. He stood in the doorway like a man unsure whether he was welcome. We need to talk, he said. I nodded. Go ahead. Rachel thinks you might be suspicious, he began carefully. She said you stopped by her office. I did. His jaw tightened. Whatever you think is happening, he said, you're wrong. Rachel and I are working on a case. It requires discretion. What case? I asked. Attorney-client privilege. Whose client? Elena, please, he said softly. Just trust me. Trust. The word felt almost insulting. Okay, I said, I trust you. His relief was immediate, visible. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in months. Thank you, he said. I love you. I met his eyes and smiled back. I love you too. And I meant something very different than he did. Because while he showered upstairs, believing he'd regained control, I sat at the kitchen table, finalizing a list. Accounts to freeze, agencies to notify, truths to release. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. And once correction begins, there's no undoing it. The collapse didn't start with shouting. It started with silence. At 9:03 a.m. the next morning, I made one phone call to the bank. I used the emergency fraud provisions tied to my business and joint accounts, the ones Samuel never bothered to read because he assumed I handled small things. I reported suspicious transfers, irregular patterns, and potential asset concealment. By 9:27 a.m., the accounts were frozen. At 9:45 a.m., I called our credit card providers and flagged unusual activity. Every card in Samuel's name was suspended pending review. At 10:15 a.m., I filed a formal report regarding unreported consulting income. Nothing exaggerated, nothing false. Just facts, paper trails, numbers. By noon, the life Samuel and Rachel had been quietly assembling began to suffocate under its own weight. Samuel called me from his office. Elena, he said, breathless, my cards aren't working. The bank says... I know, I replied calmly. What did you do? What you should have done, I said. I protected myself. There was a pause, then anger, real anger. You had no right. I had every right, I said. You were moving joint funds without consent. That's not strategy, Samuel, that's theft. He hung up. That afternoon, the second wave hit. The legal community is small, insular, hungry for whispers. The story broke quietly in a trade publication. Questions raised about ethics of senior attorney amid personal scandal. No names in the headline, but everyone knew. By the end of the day, Samuel's phone didn't stop ringing. Partners asking questions, clients postponing meetings. A polite but firm notice from the firm's ethics committee. Rachel called me next. You think you're clever? She snapped. You've started something you can't control. I didn't start anything, I replied. I just stopped staying silent. You've ruined his career. No, I said evenly. You helped him do that. And then came the moment even I hadn't rushed. Rachel's charities. I sent the documentation anonymously. Bank transfers, forged approvals, mismatched invoices to the appropriate authorities. Not to embarrass her. To stop her. Saturday morning, federal agents showed up at her house. By evening, Rachel Morrison, queen of charity galas and quiet manipulation, was arrested for embezzlement and fraud. Samuel showed up at my door that night. He looked small. No suit, no polish, no control. They arrested Rachel, he said, voice shaking. This is your fault. I studied him for a long moment. No, I said softly. This is the consequence of trusting the wrong people and betraying the right one. Aurora disappeared quickly after that. The gym terminated her contract for violating professional conduct policies. Her certifications were suspended pending review. Sponsors dropped her. The fitness world is smaller than it looks and less forgiving. Samuel's final call came days later. His voice was raw. "I'm being investigated by the Bar Association," he said. "I've lost clients. I don't have access to money. Rachel's gone. Aurora's gone." He paused. "Please," he said, "we can fix this. Counseling. Starting over." I closed my eyes, not in pain, but in closure. "No," I said, "we can't." "I love you," he whispered. "No," I replied. "You loved what I provided, not who I am." That night, he stood in the rain outside our house, knocking, calling my name, offering everything he'd once withheld. I didn't open the door. The divorce papers arrived days later. He asked for nothing. And for the first time in years, the house felt quiet in a way that didn't hurt. It felt finished. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood alone in my garage long after closing time. The lights were dim. The air smelled like oil and metal and work that mattered. I rested my hands on the hood of a car I'd rebuilt myself and realized something quietly extraordinary. I was at peace. Samuel had moved out of state, a smaller firm, a quieter life. No press, no prestige, just survival. I heard it through mutual acquaintances, never from him. We didn't speak again after the papers were signed. Rachel Morrison was sentenced to federal prison, 2 years. Her name disappeared from charity boards and society pages almost overnight. The woman who believed she controlled every room learned the hard truth about power. It only lasts until the truth walks in. Aurora vanished from the world she'd tried to climb into. Last I heard, she was working at a gym 3 states away under a different name. No sponsorships, no spotlight, just consequences. And me? I expanded the garage, hired 3 new mechanics. Took on contracts Samuel never believed were significant enough. Turns out the work he dismissed built a future he never understood. I didn't rush into dating. I didn't need to prove anything. What I needed was to remember who I was before I became someone's background noise. I learned that betrayal doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from entitlement, from believing another person will stay small so you can feel large. I learned that silence is not weakness, but staying silent forever is. And I learned that when someone tells you that you don't fit into their world, believe them. Then build a better one without them. I still believe in love, but not the kind that demands erasure. Not the kind that asks you to shrink so someone else can shine. Love should expand you. Anything else isn't love. It's just a lie waiting to be exposed. And this time, I was strong enough to let it burn.